Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. In this episode, we're going to speak with author Ronald A. Mayer. He's authored a number of books about baseball, including the New York Yankees, the 1923 team in their first championship at the new ballpark, the 1932 team, one of the most dominating Yankee teams of all time. Also a little side story about Babe Ruth and the infamous cold shot or not. Did it happen? Did it not happen? But he'll also discuss his most recent title called Baseball Memories. It's a collection of 101 poems about the game, and he'll share a few of those poems with us. These books are all available on Amazon. You can check them out. Just type in Ronald A. Mayer. But he's here to talk to us now. Hi, Ron. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Oh, thank you, James, for inviting me.
And I wanted to have you on. You've authored a number of books regarding baseball, but the Yankees, and which we'll get into. And plus, your most recent book just came out of May this year, Baseball Memories. Again, it's a collection of 101 poems. But let's just get into your background. Where did your love or passion from baseball come from?
Well, probably like a lot of other young kids, from your father. He was a Yankee fan, and so he gave me the love and the passion for the game. And I played the game for many years. I played early on in high school, and I went on to college, and I played in college. In fact, the high school, it's an interesting little story sideline. My senior year in high school, I batted well over 400. I don't know, 450, 460, whatever it was. And so I thought, I was a hitter, but the fact of the matter was, my dad had a connection with a scout, and we met with him, and he said, I can send you to Class D. And that was back in those days. That was the last stop, was D, or your first stop on the way up. He said, but I would advise you, and it was great advice, go to college. If you have anything, if you have any talent, at least you have a college education. Otherwise, if you go to D and you fail, who knows what you're going to wind up with. It was great advice. I took it, went to Montclair State, played with them, and I found out that I couldn't hit just like so many other young kids. Start throwing that curveball and everything else, and 90-mile-an-hour fastballs. I did a little writing on my own because I read a lot. I enjoyed reading, and I was fascinated with authors. How the heck they could write a book? It just fascinated me. And I was doing a little writing on my own, and I was also doing some writing for the local newspaper called The Home. I was in Secaucus then. I was doing we were living in Secaucus, and we were writing for the Home News, Secaucus Home News. The jobs I kind of gravitated to were always a writing job. And then towards the end of my career, I started writing. I seriously said, I'm going to write a book. And from all my readings of baseball, it was a local team. And I said, I'm going to write that book. And it had not been done, based on my research. It's the 1937 Newark Bears. They were the top minor league club for the New York Yankees in the International League. Great team. They had, numbers of, actually the whole 37 team, except for one ball player, Jack Fallon, I remember his name. He did not make the major leagues. Now, not all the 37 went to the Yankees, but they all went eventually to the major league. So it was a heck of a team, and arguably, it's probably one of the best minor league teams in the history of the game. That team was so good. I'm just going to quote one guy, Connie Mack, who everybody knows in baseball, and was the manager and co-owner of the of the athletics for many, many years. He said, and I'm quoting, "Newark has a great team." He means 3017. "I know Philadelphia fans would like to see them come to Shibe Park intact and do their playing in the American League." That's how good they were. My second book came out was called Perfect. It was about the uh, 14 pitchers, 14 at the time, 14 pitchers who pitched perfect games. Since then, as you know, there have been quite a few more. The next book was on Christy Mathewson, the great Christy Mathewson, and I wrote that book. I covered every game he ever pitched, starting and relieving. Now, on first hearing this, you say, "Oh man, that must be some boring book to cover every game he ever pitched." Well, what I did was, in addition to writing about the game per se, I also put in other stories that were happening in baseball at the time around the world that were interesting. So it made the book much more interesting, and it's still available in both hardcover and soft. And then I finally got into the 23 Yankees, which I know your viewers were probably more interested in. Prior to 23, the Yankees had played 1921 and 1922, played in the World Series against the Giants. And the Giants, led by John McGraw, who was king of New York, as were the Giants, beat the Yankees in both those World Series. So coming into the 23, which would be eventually the Yankees' first World Championship, there was little conflict between the two teams. In fact, the Yankees at that time were renting space at the Polo Grounds. They didn't have their stadium, and they McGraw was getting aggravated because he was a tough character, McGraw. He could be mean, and he was vicious at times, and he wasn't called Little Napoleon for nothing. And so there was no blood loss between the two clubs. In fact, eventually, because of Ruth and the Yankees' popularity, McGraw was really irked, and he kicked the Yankees out. That's why they built the stadium, the first stadium, in 1923. So, and a little story a little anecdote I'm telling you about the 23 Yankees is that when they got to the World Series, it was Lou Gehrig had come up September 1st, after September 1st. The rule then was if you came after September 1st, you could not play in the World Series. And Gehrig had one heck of a September. He was really good. The Yankees, their regular first baseman was Wally Pipp. So, but there was a precedent set in 1920 between the Brooklyn Robins, they were called then, and the Cleveland Indians. In 1920, they agreed that they would bring up each one ball player with the other's approval. So the precedent was set. So Miller Huggins, who was managing the Yankees at the time, went to Landis, who was the commissioner, and said, talked about this precedent and so forth. And Landis said, "Hey, if McGraw agrees, go ahead." So I just want to read you McGraw's comments. It's only a short comment. When the commission asked him about, letting Gehrig play, he said, and I'm quoting, "If the Yankees have an injury, it's their hard luck," he snapped. And that was the end of it. Gehrig never played in the 23 World Series. In fact, later, Frankie Frisch, who was playing for the Giants at the time, said McGraw was so mad at the Yankees and so upset over the Yankees that he wouldn't let his own team dress in the Yankees visitors' locker room. They had to dress the polo grounds and then go over to the stadium. It wasn't a far drive, but still, that'll show you tell you a lot about John McGraw.
So how do you do your research? Like, how do you find all this information on a team like the 23 Yankees?
Yeah, well, that's a good question because that's the crux of the writing. I mean, you have to know how to write a little bit, but I mean, I think the research is really critical. And I have several sources. It's too bad you can't see my library here, which I'm in, because of the computer situation. But I have close to 700 books on baseball alone, which can't get all the research, but that's a huge help.
Yeah.
I have a county library that has microfilm. I can use that. Another huge help. The Hall of Fame, they have players' files on every ball player and teams, and they're just very cooperative. Particularly late with the high tech, they can send you the whole player file. So you've got that as a resource. And I also belong to a Society of Baseball Research, SABR, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And they give you access to old copies of the sporting news. So you combine all that together, you've got some pretty good resources there to dig into.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As you would say, it's old school investigative type of journalism.
Yeah, just reminded when you said old school and the internet. There's a wealth of information on the internet also. Wealth of information.
Now you have the 23 Yankees. Now another book came out in 2018, focused on the 1932 Yankees, which some get overshadowed because when you think of the all-time great Yankee teams, everyone looks at 1927, 1961, and possibly the 98 Yankees. But
Yeah.
You look at that 1932 Yankee team, they finish 60 games over 500. They go 107-47. They sweep the World Series. Ruth has a tremendous year, hits 341. 41 home runs, 137 RBIs. I mean, they cruise along, but the 32 Yankees are somewhat maybe overshadowed by the 27 Yankees.
Yeah, I think, well, the 27 Yankees, as history goes on in baseball, they overshadow just about everybody. But the 32 club, the thing that attracted me, beside what you had mentioned, that attracted me was the fact, and I did my research, I think pretty thoroughly, that they were the only team, and I still think they're the only team that had on there, including the manager, 10 future Hall of Famers. 10. You imagine that? On one team, including the manager. I don't know of any other club, and I'll stand corrected if somebody can find one, but I'll tell you who they were. I'm going to read them off to you, and I can tell you the year of induction. Babe Ruth was first, 1936. Gehrig, 39. Herb Pennock, 48. Bill Dickey in 54. Joe McCarthy, 1957. Red Ruffing in 1967. Earl Combs in 1970. Lefty Grove in 1972. Joe Sewell in 1977. And Tony Lazzeri in 1991. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy to have so many Hall of Famers all on one team. And like I said, I think a lot of it has to do is that, in 27, yeah, they were a great team, but also you had the home run chase between Ruth and Gehrig. Of course, Ruth hit 60, and I think part of that kind of makes everyone gravitate towards the 27 team. But yeah, you look at that 32 Yankees team, probably equally as dominant, or again, might be one of the most dominant Yankee team of all.
Yeah. And of course, what also made 32, I think, a little different than other championship Yankee teams was the fact that The World Series involved Ruth's so-called home run, the one he pointed to center field and so forth. And the controversy just, still reigns today. The fact of the matter is, and I'll explain that to you, but it actually was in the third game. And there again, the Yankees and the Cubs, who they were playing, were very upset over each other. What had happened was the Yankees had Mark Koenig used to play for the Yankees for many years. He was very popular with the team and with the fans and so forth. He was traded to the Cubs, and um, when the Cubs won the World Series, he was only given a half share because they picked him up late in the season, but he did a heck of a job for them and helped win that World Series. So the Yankee players, including Ruth, who liked to agitate as much as he could, he'd call them cheapskates. He called them every kind of name he could think of. So going into the World Series, there was this real animosity, and the bench jockeying got worse and worse by the time they got to the third game, and that's when Ruth had come up. The score was, I think, it was tied 4-4 in the fifth inning. Charlie Root was pitching for the Cubs, and they claim that Ruth on I think it was a 2-2 count, 2-2 count, had pointed to center field. Some say indicating that he was going to hit the home run. Others say no, he was pointing that was he had one more strike, and went on and on. Anyway, next pitch he hits a 490-foot home run to center field. Very little was mentioned at the time it happened. Days later, sports writers start talking about the pointing and so forth. Then biographies came out years later, and that's how this thing built up into a story that is it's a great story. However, not just me, but others have found, I think. I just want to read you this little, or refer to this situation. This was years later. Ruth and Charlie Root, the guy that pitched the home run ball, were out at Hollywood, and they were involved in the movie for Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig. And Root got Babe Ruth aside and said to Babe, and I'm quoting, "Say, Babe, you didn't really call your shot that day, did you?" And Ruth smiled and said, "Of course not. But it made a hell of a story, didn't it?" So, and it's been carried on ever since. As far as I'm concerned, he didn't call the shot.
But probably not. I guess part of baseball lore and charm to put that story. But yeah. Now, before we get into your most recent book, I just want to ask you more on a personal level. Loving the Yankees, growing up as a Yankee fan. Do you have any memories of going to Yankee games and maybe seeing some of the Yankee greats of the past?
Well, the memories have faded, but yeah, I've been to the stadium when I was a young kid. I saw DiMaggio play. That's why, believe it or not, when I played center field. Certainly not like DiMaggio, but yeah, I remember him. I remember some of the wartime, Second World War time ball players. The Yankees weren't all that great in there, but I remember a guy named Stainback. Other names, but in more recent times, I've been over, seeing the Mick, Vera, you name it, Ford, all the great ones, and up until the Jeter era, and Torrey, and so forth.
Like when you saw a player like Mantle at the time, like what was the atmosphere? Like what did it feel like, when he was at the plate?
Well, he was electric, no question. Man, that's why these guys get paid so much money. Even now, I mean, I know free agency is gone a long time ago, but They're paid because people come to see them, no question about it. And so, yeah, I mean, they're a draw, and that's part of the reason for the money.
All right, so let's get into your most recent book. Came out in May. It's called Baseball Memories.
Yep.
It's different from your other books. It's a collection of 101 poems.
Yeah,
Again, available on Amazon. Just look up Baseball Memories, or you type in Ronald A Mayer. It'll come up. So what gave you the idea to do this book? Because it's different from all your other books, which are more like historical accounts. This is a collection of poems.
yeah, it is. And I'll tell you what gave me the idea. Um, I'm not a fan of poetry. To be honest, it's a hell of a thing to say when you write a book about poems. But I'm not a big fan of poetry. But the one poet I did like was Ogden Nash. He was a great poet, just had a touch for it, and witty as all heck. And he wrote a poem called "Line Up for Yesterday," and he took the alphabet, going from A. A is for Alexander, with a little 4-line poem. I read that. I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." I just loved it. I said, "Let me try that myself." I said, "Let me try it more current." And I'll just read it, just a couple of guys. Like, A is for Aaron, Mobile's favorite son. Throw your best pitch, it's a home run. B is for Berra, with the verbal touch. Love the bad ball, especially in the clutch. C is for Clemente, who worked the sugar farm. Dared runners to test his rifle arm. And it goes on through the whole alphabet. So after I wrote that, I said, maybe I should write a whole book on poems, not just Yankees or anything, but something that would uh, celebrate the immortal players, classic games, weird moments, wacky moments, and so that's how I came up with the 101 poems. This one's titled "Mr. Stengel and Mr. Berra." Mr. Stengel and Mr. Berra are a linguistics joy. They will chat with anyone, even the bat boy. Casey is the champion of language confusion. 5 rambling minutes and you'll need a transfusion. Casey is the master of verbal length and digression. He can talk you out of a serious depression. Casey once testified by a Senate hearing. Left-centered is befuddled and himself endearing. Reporters coined the twisted tongue Stengelese. It caught on and lingered like Limburger cheese. Yogi, on the other hand, is very terse. Some of his quotes could be put to verse. Yogi is credited with many a gaffe, giving millions of fans a hearty laugh. He once said, "It ain't the heat, it's the humility," having spoken these words with uncommon gentility. Yogi has yogiisms that are often accidental, like 90% of the game is half mental. Casey and Yogi have no linguistic equals, and baseball will unlikely ever see sequels. There were more to these two baseball greats than mere spontaneous linguistic mates. As a player and manager, they knew the game, the reason both are in Cooperstown Hall of Fame. And I have one on DiMaggio's 51-game hitting streak. Would you like to hear that one?
Yeah, fire away.
It began innocently on May 15, 1941. No, it was not an exciting home run. Just a harmless single was the blow by a guy nicknamed Joltin' Joe DiMaggio. The Yankee Clipper was another nickname. Over the years brought him well-deserved fame. That harmless little single started it all. The greatest hitting streak in Major League Baseball. Against the Red Sox, the streak ran to 10. the sports media silent as Big Ben. By mid-June, the streak had reached 25. National coverage now came alive. As DiMaggio continued, the pressure mounted. Every at-bat, every pitch now counted. He singled on a 3-0 pitch in late June. Now the streak at 40, nothing picayune. Amongst all the media and fan ballyhoo, July 2, he set a new record at 42. In Cleveland, the record jumped to 56 without a hitch as Joe slashed a single on Miller's first pitch. Over 67,000 fans came the next night to watch Joe extend the streak to their delight. But sadly, it was not to be, for Joltin' Joe went 0 for 3. But the box score does not tell the true story. Joe still went out in a blaze of glory. Third baseman Ken Keltner, the player to blame, who robbed Joe of 2 hits. What a shame. But Joe was not finished, just more mystique. The next day, he began a 16-game hitting streak. The summer of 41, Joe inspired a nation, it's true, and helped them forget oncoming World War II.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
And I actually wanted to, it's funny that you put that, after the 56 game hitting streak, he actually put on another 16 games after that. Most people don't, kind of forget that. But he had like another little, not as good as 56, but he also put a streak after that. So basically, this book is, again, it's not just Yankee moments, but there's all types of baseball moments. Even funny, one of them was you have one around the 10-cent beer night in Cleveland. And I think that's when, I think Billy Martin came out with a baseball bat and the rest of the Rangers, and then we got something to challenge the fans. So you pretty much have all these different types of baseball memories, but you put some poetry to it. And so, fans, audience members, definitely check it out. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on again. People can go to Amazon, just look up Ronald A. Mayer, get all these different books again. Various books, again, around the Newark minor league club, of course, the 23 Yankees, the 32 Yankees, and again, your most recent book, Baseball Memories, just came out in May. It's a collection of 101 poems. It was an honor to have you on, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, James.